My husband's family treated me like trash. Called me the uneducated kindergarten teacher who wasn't good enough for their son. At his sister's wedding, they sat me at a table by the restrooms like I was hired help. Then the Air Force pilot groom stopped mid-reception, walked across that silent ballroom, and saluted me at attention. Major Moore, you're the voice that brought me home. You should have seen their faces. Before I tell you how one military salute destroyed my classist in-laws in front of 200 wedding guests, smash that subscribe button because this story is about hidden rank, Air Force Special Investigations, and watching karma obliterate people who thought they knew everything about you. Now, let me take you back to where this all began. I still remember the first time David's mother looked at me. Not looked at me with interest or warmth, but looked at me the way you'd examine something stuck to your designer shoe. We'd been dating for 8 months when he finally brought me home to meet the Moore family. I was cautiously optimistic. I wore a simple but elegant dress, brought a bouquet of her favorite peonies that David had mentioned, practiced my posture in the car mirror. David squeezed my hand before we walked through those massive double doors and whispered, "Just be yourself. They'll come around." He was wrong. Patricia Moore opened the door and her polite smile flickered the moment she took me in. Not disappeared entirely, just dimmed. Like someone had adjusted the brightness on a screen. "Oh," she said. Just that. "Oh, the teacher." The way she said teacher, you'd think I'd told her I sorted garbage for a living. David introduced me properly, and she shook my hand with 2 fingers, the way you'd touch something you weren't sure was clean. His father, Richard, gave me a curt nod from his leather wingback chair, then returned to his Wall Street Journal. His sister Julia, home from her junior year at Princeton, looked me up and down like I was an outfit she was deciding whether to return. "David, can we talk?" Privately, she asked, already walking toward the kitchen. I stood in that marble foyer for 12 minutes alone, staring at family portraits where everyone looked like they'd stepped out of a Ralph Lauren catalog before David came back and suggested we leave early. That was 4 years ago. We got married anyway. Love makes you foolish sometimes. Makes you think you can bridge gaps that are wider than the Grand Canyon. David promised me it would improve, that they'd warm up to me eventually, that I just needed to give them time. So I gave them time. For years of it. For years of Thanksgiving dinners where every dish I brought was interesting instead of delicious. For years of Christmas mornings where Patricia gave me bath sets from TJ Maxx while Julia got diamond earrings. For years of family gatherings where I was introduced as David's wife who teaches little children with a smile that said how quaint. But here's what the Moore family didn't know about me. Here's what nobody knew except David and a handful of people with security clearances higher than most members of Congress. I wasn't just some simple kindergarten teacher who sang the alphabet and wiped noses for a living. That was my cover. My real name is Major Tina Moore, and I've been a covert operative with Air Force Office of Special Investigations for 11 years. I've run counterintelligence operations across 4 continents. I've coordinated extractions that saved the lives of pilots shot down behind enemy lines. I've got commendations in a locked safe that I can't show anyone because the operations they're from are still classified above top secret. When I told people I taught kindergarten, I was actually tracking foreign espionage threats and coordinating with special tactics units in hostile territory. When I said I had parent-teacher conferences, I was sometimes on encrypted calls with combatant commanders. David knew. I told him everything before we got engaged because I don't believe in building a marriage on deception. He thought it was extraordinary at first. He'd hint his college friends vaguely, careful never to reveal specifics, quietly proud to have a wife who was more than she appeared. But he never told his family. When I asked him why, he claimed it was for operational security, for my safety, to protect my cover. But I knew the truth. He was ashamed. Ashamed that I didn't have an Ivy League MBA like his sister. Ashamed that on paper I looked like I made $35,000 a year cutting construction paper. Ashamed that I didn't fit the image of what a Moore wife should be in his family's carefully curated world. The wedding invitation arrived on a Thursday. Actually, it didn't arrive to me at all. It came addressed to Mr. David Moran Guest, and my name was added below in different handwriting, like an afterthought. Like I was a +1 to my own sister-in-law's wedding. Julia was marrying Captain Michael Chandler, a decorated Air Force combat pilot. And that's when I knew this wedding was going to be a problem. Because 3 years ago, in a mission I can never talk about, in a country I can never name, I was the voice in Michael Chandler's headset when his F-16 was shot down 70 miles behind enemy lines. I was the Air Force officer who coordinated his extraction while he was bleeding in a ditch, surrounded by hostiles, certain he was going to die. He didn't know my name. He didn't know my face. He only knew my call sign, Guardian Angel. And in 2 weeks, I was going to walk into his wedding and sit in the back like I didn't matter. While my husband's family treated me like I was nothing. They had no idea what was coming. Monday morning, I walked into my kindergarten classroom at Riverside Elementary at 7:30, just like I had every school day for the past 4 years. The walls were covered in alphabet charts and finger paintings. 20 tiny desks arranged in clusters. A reading corner with cushions shaped like frogs and ladybugs. To anyone watching, I was Miss Moore, the patient teacher who loved children and wore cardigans with seasonal patterns. What they didn't see was me checking my phone between lessons, reading encrypted messages disguised as text notifications from my sister. What they didn't know is that during my planning period, I wasn't grading spelling tests. I was analyzing intelligence reports on a compromised asset in Eastern Europe, typing recommendations that would reach the Pentagon before lunch. My classroom had better operational security than most people's offices. The door stayed locked when I wasn't actively teaching. My laptop required biometric authentication and a 16-character password. Every document I touched, even the innocent-looking lesson plans, got shredded at the end of each day. I'd been running this cover for 11 years, and I was good at it. Better than good. I'd built an entire believable life around construction paper and juice boxes while coordinating operations that kept pilots alive and enemies guessing. That evening, David and I drove to his parents' house for the monthly family dinner I'd learned to dread. Patricia had made her famous herb-crusted lamb. The dining room table could seat 12, but there were only 5 of us. Richard at the head, Patricia to his right, Julia home for the weekend, David across from his sister, and me at the far end like I was dining in a different zip code. So Tina, Patricia said, cutting her lamb into precise, identical pieces. How are your little students? Still teaching them their colors. Still teaching them to read, actually, I said, keeping my voice pleasant. We're working on phonics and early comprehension skills. Julia snorted into her wine glass. It must be so rewarding, working with children who think you're smart. Richard chuckled. David looked at his plate. I imagine it's similar to your economics classes at Princeton, I said, meeting Julia's eyes. Breaking down complex concepts into manageable pieces. It's really not the same thing at all, Julia said, her smile sharp. My professors have PhDs, multiple degrees. Published research. Julia's professor just got nominated for a Nobel Prize, Patricia added, like this somehow reflected on Julia herself. I could have told them I'd briefed 3-star generals last month. I could have mentioned the counterintelligence medal sitting in my safe deposit box. I could have explained that while Julia was writing papers about economic theory, I was tracking actual threats to national security. Instead, I said, that's wonderful. Congratulations to him. David reached under the table and squeezed my hand. Not in solidarity. In relief that I hadn't made waves. That night, lying in bed, he whispered, thank you for not engaging with Julia. I know she can be difficult. Difficult. Like she was a puzzle instead of a person who treated me like dirt while her parents smiled and her brother said nothing. Sure, I said to the ceiling. No problem. 2 days later, the official wedding invitation arrived in the mail, my name added as an afterthought, and I realized Julia's big day was going to be the stage for something she'd never planned on. The truth. The engagement party happened 3 weeks after the invitation arrived. Patricia and Richard threw it at their country club, the kind of place where the parking lot looked like a luxury car dealership and everyone spoke in hushed tones like they were in church. I wore a navy wrap dress David had approved that morning. Conservative. Forgettable. Exactly what was expected of me. Julia held court in the center of the ballroom, her engagement ring catching the light every time she moved her hand, which was often. Michael stood beside her in his dress uniform, and I felt my breath catch when I first saw him across the room. He looked different than his photo. Older. There was a tightness around his eyes that hadn't been there before, the kind that comes from seeing things you can't unsee. A thin scar ran along his left temple, disappearing into his hairline. Shrapnel wound. I'd read about it in the after-action report. Tina. Julia's voice cut through the crowd. She waved me over with the enthusiasm of someone showing off a new purchase. Come meet Michael. Michael, this is my sister-in-law, Tina. David's wife. Michael extended his hand. His grip was firm, his smile polite but distant. Nice to meet you. You too, I said, keeping my voice light. Congratulations. Tina teaches kindergarten, Julia announced to the small circle that had gathered around us. She said it the way someone might say, Tina collects bottle caps, or Tina believes the earth is flat. That's important work, Michael said, and he sounded like he meant it. It's so sweet that you think that, Julia said, touching his arm. But it's not exactly the same as what you do, is it? Flying combat missions, serving your country, risking your life. Different kinds of service, Michael said simply. Julia laughed like he'd made a joke. Michael's too humble. Do you know he was shot down 3 years ago? Behind enemy lines, completely surrounded, bleeding from shrapnel wounds. He survived for 18 hours in hostile territory before they could extract him. 16 hours and 42 minutes, actually. But I didn't correct her. There was this Air Force officer, Julia continued, her eyes shining. A woman, coordinating everything from some base somewhere. Michael says she talked him through the worst night of his life. Kept him calm. Kept him hidden. Directed the rescue team right to his position. Michael's jaw tightened slightly. He didn't like the attention, I could tell. Didn't like his worst moment being turned into cocktail party conversation. She saved his life, Julia said, squeezing his arm. His guardian angel, he calls her. Isn't that romantic? I wish we could find her, invite her to the wedding. But it's all classified. Julia, Michael said quietly. Maybe we don't need to. Oh, Michael's modest about it, but I'm not. Julia turned to me, her smile sharp. You wouldn't understand what it's like, Tina. Being with someone who's been through real danger. Someone who understands duty and sacrifice. Someone who's actually a hero. The words hung in the air between us. Michael looked uncomfortable. David, who'd appeared at my elbow with drinks, stared at his shoes. No, I said, meeting Julia's eyes. I suppose I wouldn't. Exactly. Julia's smile widened, victorious. It's a different world. Michael and I operate on a different level. No offense. None taken, I said. But I memorized the look on her face when she said it. The smugness. The certainty that she was better than me. I'd remember it 2 weeks later when that certainty shattered into 1,000 pieces on her wedding day. The dress email arrived on a Tuesday afternoon while I was between classified briefings. The subject line read, Wedding attire, mandatory compliance. Mandatory compliance. Like I was a subordinate instead of family. Julia had attached a photo of a shapeless, floor-length gown in a color she described as dusty mauve. It looked like something from a grandmother's closet circa 1987. High neckline, long sleeves, no shape whatsoever. The kind of dress designed to make someone disappear. I've selected specific colors for each table, her email explained. Your table will be wearing muted earth tones so as not to distract from the bridal party's color palette. I've taken the liberty of ordering your dress in your size. It's non-refundable, so please don't make a fuss. She guessed my size wrong. Of course she had. David read the email over my shoulder that evening. It's not that bad, he said, which meant it was exactly that bad and he knew it. She's trying to make me look frumpy, I said. She's just very particular about her wedding aesthetic. She seated me at a table with earth tones, David. Do you know where tables with earth tones go at weddings? He didn't answer. In the back. Near the bathrooms. Where people won't be in the photos. Tina, please. Just wear the dress. It's one night. Just wear the dress. Just ignore Julia. Just let them treat you like you're nothing. Just. The dress arrived 4 days later. It was worse in person. The fabric was stiff, the color made me look washed out, and the cut was designed for someone with no waist and no curves. I hung it in my closet and looked at it for 3 days. Then I took it to my friend Maria, who ran an alteration shop in Arlington and had a top-secret clearance because half her clients were Pentagon officials who needed their uniforms adjusted. Make it fit, I told her. Make it perfect. Maria raised an eyebrow. This dress doesn't want to be perfect. This dress wants to be a potato sack. Exactly. She understood immediately. How perfect are we talking? I want to look like I belong in that ballroom. Like I own that ballroom. Maria smiled. Give me 3 days. When I picked up the dress, I barely recognized it. Maria had taken in the waist, dropped the neckline to something elegant but appropriate, shortened the sleeves to 3/4 length, and somehow transformed the dusty mauve into a rich, deep blue by overdying the fabric. I might have accidentally spilled dye on it, Maria said, completely straight-faced. Terribly sorry. But blue is your color. Brings out your eyes. Makes your skin glow. I looked at myself in the fitting room mirror. The dress hugged my waist, skimmed my hips, fell in a perfect A-line to the floor. The blue was regal, confident, commanding. I looked like myself. My real self. Julia is going to lose her mind, I said. Good, Maria said. That's what she gets for trying to dim your light. I paid Maria double her rate and drove home with the dress hanging in my back seat like a secret weapon. David saw it the night before the wedding when I was packing. That's not the dress Julia sent, he said, his voice tight. No, it's better. Tina, she's going to notice. She's going to be upset. Then she shouldn't have tried to make me look invisible. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. Can you just, for once, not make waves? I zipped the garment bag closed and looked at my husband. Really looked at him. No, I said. I don't think I can. The rehearsal dinner was Friday night at some Italian restaurant in Georgetown that required reservations 3 months in advance. David had mentioned it casually 2 weeks earlier, the way you'd mention needing to pick up dry cleaning. It's just family and the wedding party, he'd said. Very small. Very intimate. I'd nodded, assuming I was included in family since I'd been legally married to David for 3 years. Friday afternoon, I closed my classroom early and rushed home to change. I'd picked out a simple black dress, nothing flashy, exactly the kind of understated outfit that wouldn't give Patricia ammunition. I was touching up my makeup when David came out of the bedroom in his suit. You look nice, I said. Thanks. He checked his watch. I should head out soon. Traffic's going to be terrible. I looked at him in the mirror. What time do we need to leave? His face did something complicated. Tina. What time, David? There was a mix-up with the reservation. The restaurant can only accommodate the number Julia originally gave them. I put down my lipstick very carefully. What are you saying? It's just the wedding party and immediate family. Julia's bridesmaids, Michael's groomsmen, parents. It's already tight. I'm immediate family. I'm your wife. I know. I tried to explain that, but Julia said the restaurant is firm on their capacity and you're going without me. It wasn't a question. David loosened his tie, then tightened it again. It's just one dinner, Tina. The wedding is tomorrow. That's the important part. I'll smooth things over with Julia tonight. Explain that you need to be included in family events. I'll make it right. You'll make it right, I repeated. Tonight. At the dinner I'm not invited to. Please don't make this harder than it already is. Harder for who exactly? He didn't answer. He picked up his keys from the dresser, checked his reflection one more time, and headed for the door. Then he paused, turned back. I love you, he said. You know that, right? I looked at my husband standing in our bedroom doorway, dressed for a family dinner that his family didn't consider me worthy to attend. A dinner he was going to anyway. Sure, I said. He left. I stood there in my black dress for a long time after I heard his car pull out of the driveway. Then I changed into sweats, ordered Thai food, and ate it alone on the couch while watching a documentary about World War II codebreakers. My phone buzzed around 9. David. Dinner went well. Julia's in a good mood. Tomorrow will be better. Love you. I didn't respond. At 10:30, he sent a photo. The whole group at the restaurant, glasses raised in a toast. Julia in the center, radiant. Michael beside her, smiling. David on the end, barely in frame. There was an empty chair next to him. They'd had room. They'd always had room. I set my phone face down on the coffee table and went to bed. When David came home after midnight, smelling like wine and his mother's perfume, I pretended to be asleep. He kissed my forehead and whispered, "Tomorrow will be different. I promise." But I'd stopped believing his promises somewhere between the engagement party and the rehearsal dinner I wasn't allowed to attend. Tomorrow wouldn't be different because David wanted it to be. Tomorrow would be different because I was done being invisible. I was done being the woman they could erase from family photos and exclude from family dinners. Tomorrow, they were going to see exactly who I was. And there wouldn't be a single thing David could do to smooth it over. The wedding was at Rosewood Manor, one of those estates that looked like it had been imported stone by stone from the English countryside. David and I drove separately because he needed to arrive early to help with last-minute setup, which apparently meant standing around while Julia barked orders at the event coordinator. I pulled into the gravel parking lot at 11, 2 hours before the ceremony. The blue dress hung in the back seat, still in its garment bag. My hair was natural, pulled back in an elegant low bun that had taken me 40 minutes to perfect. My makeup was flawless. Subtle but striking. I looked like someone who belonged in a ballroom. Like someone who commanded respect. I grabbed my bag from the passenger seat and headed toward the manor's side entrance, the one the venue coordinator had mentioned in her email for family arrivals. The hallway was all dark wood paneling and oil paintings of people who'd been dead for centuries. Julia's voice echoed from somewhere ahead before I saw her. "No, the champagne goes on the left side of the bar." The left side. She rounded the corner and nearly collided with me. Oh. We stood there for a moment, neither moving. Julia looked stunning, I had to admit. Her hair was swept up in an intricate style that had probably required 3 people and 2 hours. Her makeup was bridal perfection. She wore a silk robe with bride embroidered on the back in gold thread. Her eyes traveled from my face down to my garment bag and back up again. "You're early," she said. I wanted to give myself plenty of time. Right. Well, she smoothed her robe. "The ceremony doesn't start until 1, so you might want to wait in your car or find a bench outside somewhere. The manor is reserved for the bridal party right now." "I'll stay out of your way," I said, moving to step past her. She shifted to block me. "Actually, Tina, I need to talk to you about something." I waited. "Your hair," she said, gesturing vaguely at my head. "You're wearing it natural?" "Yes. It's very voluminous. Very noticeable." Her smile was sharp. "I don't want to be rude, but this is my wedding day, and I've worked very hard to create a specific aesthetic. I can't have you drawing attention away from you." From the bridal party, she corrected smoothly. "We have a very cohesive look. Very elegant and refined. And your hair, while I'm sure it's lovely for every day, it's just very big. Very distracting." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "You want me to change my hair?" "I'm just asking you to be considerate. Maybe pull it back tighter? Or there's a salon in town that does emergency blowouts. I'd be happy to pay for it. Consider it a gift." A gift. Like she was doing me a favor. And while we're on the subject, Julia continued, her voice dropping conspiratorially, "When the photographer is taking family shots, it would be better if you stayed to the side. You understand, don't you? These are photos we'll have forever. We want them to look a certain way. Stay out of the photos. Stay out of sight. Stay invisible." I looked at Julia in her bridal robe with her perfect hair and her perfect condescension, and something inside me that had been bending for 4 years finally snapped straight. "No," I said quietly. "Excuse me. No, I won't change my hair. No, I won't stay out of the photos. And no, I won't pretend anymore that the way you treat me is acceptable. Julia's eyes widened. Tina, I don't know what you think you're. I'll see you at the ceremony, Julia. Congratulations on your wedding. I walked past her, my shoulder brushing hers, and kept walking until I found the ladies' lounge. I locked the door, hung up my dress, and looked at myself in the mirror. My hair was perfect. My makeup was perfect. Everything about me was exactly as it should be. For the first time in 4 years, I looked like Major Tina Moore. And I was done apologizing for it. The ceremony began at 1 o'clock sharp. I entered the ballroom from the side entrance just as the string quartet started playing, slipping into a seat in the very last row. The back corner, naturally, where people like me belonged in the more family hierarchy. The ballroom was stunning. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings. White roses and hydrangeas covered every surface. 200 guests filled the rows of white chairs, all facing an altar draped in silk and candlelight. The whole thing probably cost more than most people made in a year. David sat in the second row with his parents. I could see the back of his head, the way he kept checking his phone in his lap. Probably texting me, wondering where I was. I'd silenced my phone an hour ago. The music shifted. The wedding party began their procession down the aisle. Julia's bridesmaids in champagne-colored gowns, Michael's groomsmen in their dress blues. Air Force uniforms, crisp and formal, medals gleaming on their chests. Then Michael appeared at the far end of the aisle. Even from the back of the room, I could see him clearly. His uniform was immaculate, his posture parade ground perfect. But it was the patch on his shoulder that made my breath catch. The squadron insignia. 35th Fighter Squadron. The Pantons. I knew that patch. I'd seen it in briefing documents and mission files. I'd heard it over radio communications on the worst night of his life. Michael walked to the altar and took his position, his jaw tight with the kind of controlled emotion that comes before a big moment. His groomsmen flanked him, all of them Air Force, all of them wearing their service with the quiet pride that comes from knowing what it costs. The music swelled. Everyone stood. Julia appeared at the back of the ballroom, and I had to admit she looked beautiful. Her dress was all lace and diamonds, her veil trailing behind her like something from a fairy tale. Richard stood beside her, his chest puffed with pride as he prepared to walk his daughter down the aisle. I watched them process past me. Julia's eyes swept the crowd, drinking in the attention, the gasps, the tears. She didn't see me. She never saw me. They reached the altar. The officiant began speaking in those formal tones that all wedding officiants seem to use, talking about love and commitment and partnership, about standing beside someone through the best and worst of times. I thought about the worst night of Michael's life, the darkness, the fear, the certainty that he would die alone in enemy territory. I thought about the 16 hours and 42 minutes I'd spent coordinating his rescue. The way his voice had cracked when the helicopter finally appeared. The single word he'd said when they confirmed extraction, Angel. Michael stood at that altar, handsome and composed, and he had no idea I was 30 feet behind him. No idea that the woman who saved his life was sitting in the back row of his wedding, invisible as always. The ceremony continued. Vows were exchanged. Rings were placed. Julia smiled like she'd won the lottery, and maybe in her world, she had. A decorated war hero for a husband. The perfect military wedding. The perfect life. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the officiant declared. You may kiss the bride. Michael kissed Julia, and the ballroom erupted in applause. They walked back down the aisle together, Julia's hand tucked into Michael's arm, both of them beaming. The wedding party followed. Then the parents, then row by row, the guests filed out toward the cocktail hour. I stayed in my seat until the ballroom was nearly empty. Then I stood, smoothed my blue dress, and walked toward the reception hall. The real show was about to begin. And this time, I wouldn't be invisible. The reception hall was somehow even more extravagant than the ceremony space. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked manicured gardens. The dance floor gleamed under more crystal chandeliers. Each table had centerpieces that probably cost what I made in a week of teaching kindergarten. I found my table assignment on the seating chart by the entrance. Table 17. I scanned the elegant calligraphed cards, following the numbers. Tables 1 through 8 were near the dance floor, closest to the head table where Julia and Michael would sit. Tables 9 through 16 formed a semicircle around them. Table 17 was in the far corner, next to the kitchen doors. Of course it was. I made my way across the reception hall, feeling eyes follow me. My blue dress drew attention whether I wanted it to or not. I heard whispers as I passed. Saw Patricia's face go tight when she spotted me from table 3. Watched David's head snap up from table 2, his expression shifting from confusion to something like panic. Good. Let him panic. Table 17 had 8 place settings. I was the first to arrive. The seat they'd assigned me faced the kitchen doors, which meant my back would be to the entire reception. I'd spend the evening watching waiters instead of the celebration. I sat down and placed my small clutch on the table. The centerpiece here was noticeably smaller than the others. The chairs were a slightly different style. This wasn't just a bad table. This was the table for people they'd had to invite, but didn't actually want there. A waiter pushed through the kitchen doors carrying a tray of champagne flutes. He nearly collided with the back of my chair. "Excuse me," I said, turning. He looked at me, then at the table number. "You're sitting here?" "That's what my place card says. This is usually where we put vendors. You know, the DJ's girlfriend, the photographer's assistant. People who aren't really guests." He emphasized the last word like it explained everything. "I'm family," I said evenly. "Right." He didn't sound convinced. "Well, just so you know, it gets loud back here. Kitchen noise, people going in and out. You might want to grab your drink and stand somewhere else. Mingle." He walked away before I could respond. I sat there for a moment, looking at the empty chairs around me, the kitchen doors that kept swinging open and closed, the view of absolutely nothing except staff and service corridors. For years of this. For years of being made to feel like I didn't belong. Like I didn't matter. Like I was an inconvenience they had to tolerate because David had made the unfortunate decision to marry me. I picked up my clutch and stood. I was done. I'd come to the wedding like David had asked. I'd worn the dress Julia had assigned me, even if I'd made it beautiful. I'd sat in the back during the ceremony and found my place at table 17 like a good little outcast. But I didn't have to stay for the humiliation of the reception. I could leave. Go home. Pack my things while David was here celebrating with his family. Be gone before he came back with more promises he'd never keep. I was halfway to the exit when the doors at the front of the reception hall opened. Julia and Michael entered to thunderous applause, her hand raised in his, both of them radiant. The DJ's voice boomed across the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, for the first time as husband and wife, Captain and Mrs. Michael Chandler." More applause. Cheers. Julia basked in it, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. I stood frozen near the exit, my hand on the door. Just leave, I told myself. Just go. But something kept me rooted there. Some instinct honed over 11 years of operations. The feeling you get right before everything changes. I let go of the door and stayed. Dinner was served. Speeches began. Michael's best man told stories about flight school and close calls and brotherhood. One of Julia's bridesmaids talked about how they'd been friends since kindergarten, how she'd always known Julia would have the perfect wedding. Then Julia stood, microphone in hand, her cheeks flushed from champagne and attention. "I know the bride isn't supposed to give a speech," she said, her voice carrying across the room. "But it's my wedding, so I make the rules." Laughter rippled through the crowd. "I want to thank everyone for being here today. Your presence means the world to us." She looked around the room, her gaze sweeping across tables. "Well, almost everyone here." More laughter, uncertain this time. I have to say, it's interesting to see who actually understands what this day means. Who gets it? Her eyes found me in the corner by the kitchen doors. And who's just here for the free food? The laughter died. People shifted in their seats. "My sister-in-law is here somewhere." Tina? Are you still here? Julia shaded her eyes theatrically, scanning the room. Oh, there you are. In the back. How appropriate. My face went hot. Every head in the room turned toward me. Tina teaches kindergarten, Julia continued, her voice dripping with fall sweetness. Colors and shapes and nap time. It's adorable, really. But being married to a real hero, someone like Michael who understands duty and sacrifice. She shook her head. I don't think someone like her could ever comprehend what that means. The room was completely silent now. But that's okay, Julia said, raising her glass. Not everyone can operate at our level. Not everyone. Michael stood up. The movement was so sudden, so sharp, that Julia stopped mid-sentence. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking past the head table, past the dance floor, past the rows of guests. He was looking directly at me. His face had gone completely white. Michael, Julia's voice wavered. Baby, what's... But Michael was already moving. He stepped away from the head table and started walking across the reception hall. His steps were measured, military precise, his eyes locked on mine. The room seemed to hold its breath. He stopped 3 feet in front of me, close enough that I could see the scar on his temple, the one from the shrapnel. Close enough to see his hands trembling slightly at his sides. It's you, he said quietly. Then louder, it's you. I didn't move, didn't speak. Michael's jaw worked. His eyes were bright. Guardian Angel. Call sign 62 Alpha 9. November 13th. 1600 hours local time. My heart stopped. You kept me alive, he said, his voice cracking. For 16 hours, you were the only voice I heard. The only reason I didn't give up. The only reason I'm standing here. Then Captain Michael Chandler, decorated combat pilot, came to attention. His spine straightened. His shoulders pulled back. His heels came together with a sharp click. And he saluted me. Major Moore, he said, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom. I didn't know. I never knew it was you. You led my extraction. You brought me home. The room erupted. Gasps. Whispers. Chairs scraping as people stood to see. Camera phones appeared, pointed at us. I stood there in my blue dress, looking at this man I'd saved 3 years ago, and slowly, properly, I returned his salute. At ease, Captain, I said quietly. Michael's hand dropped. His eyes were wet. I've wanted to thank you for 3 years. I've wanted to find you, to tell you what you did for me, what it meant. You just did, I said. Behind him, at the head table, Julia stood frozen, her microphone dangling from her hand. Her face had gone from confused to pale to something like horror as she processed what was happening. Her sister-in-law, the kindergarten teacher, the woman she'd mocked not 30 seconds ago, was a major in the United States Air Force, was the guardian angel who saved her husband's life. David was on his feet at table 2, his face ashen. Patricia's mouth hung open. Richard looked like he'd been struck. Michael turned to face the room, his voice strong. This woman coordinated my rescue when I was shot down behind enemy lines. She kept me calm when I thought I was dying. She's the reason I'm alive. The reason any of this is possible. He looked back at me. The reason I got to marry the woman I love. Then he held out his hand. I took it, and Michael Chandler led me from the corner by the kitchen doors to the center of the dance floor, where everyone could see exactly who I was. The applause started slowly. One person clapping, then another, then a wave of sound that filled the ballroom. Not polite wedding applause. Something deeper. Respect. Michael squeezed my hand once, then stepped back, returning to his bride. Julia stood at the head table like a statue. Her perfect makeup couldn't hide the red creeping up her neck, the way her chest heaved with each breath. When Michael reached her, she grabbed his arm. You embarrassed me, she hissed, loud enough that the nearby tables heard. On my wedding day, you embarrassed me for her? Julia, I had to. You humiliated me in front of everyone. Her voice was rising, cracking. You stopped my speech to salute the kindergarten teacher? She's not a kindergarten teacher, Michael said quietly. She's an Air Force major who saved my life. I don't care. Julia's voice broke into something ugly. This is my day. Mine. And you just made it about her. Patricia appeared at Julia's side, her face tight with fury. This is unacceptable. Tina, you should have disclosed your situation before now. You've made a spectacle. I made a spectacle? I heard myself say. I've sat quietly through 4 years of your contempt. For years of being treated like I'm not good enough for your family. And now you're upset because you finally know the truth. Richard joined them, his voice low and dangerous. You deliberately deceived us. I maintained operational security, I corrected. There's a difference. David pushed through the crowd that had gathered. His face was pale, his tie askew. Tina, can we please talk about this privately? Please. Now you want to talk? I looked at my husband. Really looked at him. Where were you during Julia's speech? When she was humiliating me in front of 200 people. I was going to say something, You were going to say something. Like you were going to say something at the rehearsal dinner I wasn't invited to. Like you were going to say something when your mother gave me a bath set for Christmas. Like you've been going to say something for 4 years. That's not fair. What's not fair is that I've been protecting you. My voice was steady now, clear. I've been silent because you asked me to be. I've let your family treat me like garbage because you were too afraid to defend me. I convinced myself that was love. That was partnership. I pulled my wedding ring off. The metal felt foreign against my skin, like it had never really belonged there. But love doesn't ask you to be smaller, I said. Partnership doesn't mean being invisible. I held the ring out to David. He stared at it like it was something he couldn't comprehend. Tina, don't do this. Not here. Not now. We can work through this. There's nothing to work through, I said. I'm done. I placed the ring in his palm and closed his fingers around it. Then I turned to Michael, who stood watching with something like understanding in his eyes. Congratulations on your marriage, Captain. I hope it's everything you deserve. Thank you, Major, he said. For everything. I nodded. Looked at Julia, who was crying now, mascara running down her face. At Patricia, whose mouth was compressed into a thin line. At Richard, who couldn't meet my eyes. At David, who still held my ring like he couldn't believe what was happening. Enjoy your evening, I said. And I walked out. Not the side entrance. Not the back door. Straight through the center of the reception hall, my blue dress flowing behind me, my head high, my shoulders back. Every eye followed me. Every phone captured it. But I wasn't invisible anymore. I pushed through the main doors into the cooling evening air, walked to my car, got in, started the engine, and I drove away from the Moore family forever. Behind me, the wedding continued. The music would start again. The dancing would resume. Julia would compose herself, and they'd all pretend this hadn't happened. But I was done pretending. For the first time in 4 years, I was exactly who I'd always been. Major Tina Moore. Guardian angel. Free. So that's my story. The day I stopped being invisible. But here's the thing, if you watched all the way to the end and you don't subscribe, you're doing exactly what David did. You're witnessing someone's truth and choosing to walk away silent. Right now, there's someone in your life who's sitting at their own table 17. Someone being treated like they don't matter. Someone who needs to know they're not alone. And if you don't share this video, if you don't hit subscribe, if you just scroll past like this didn't mean anything, you're leaving them there. You know how many people watch these stories and never subscribe? Thousands. They take the inspiration, they feel the emotions, and then they disappear. They become the empty chair at the rehearsal dinner. Don't be that person. Subscribe right now. Share this video. Leave a comment telling me your own Table 17 moment. Because stories like this only matter if they reach the people who need them. And the person who needs this story most? They're one share away from seeing it. Don't let them keep thinking they have to stay small to be loved. Hit that subscribe button. Do it now. For everyone still waiting for their moment to stand up. Don't be silent like David. Be the person who stands up and says, I see you. Subscribe.